Namaskar and welcome back to Aviation Army. Go where you feel the most alive. In part 1 of the video on runway and taxiway signs, we learned the basics of aerodrome signs and learned about the mandatory instruction signs. In part 2 of the video, we learned about the information signs. And today, in part 3 of the video, we will be talking about something that is equally important but is overlooked many times, that is the design of signs. Every sign you see at an airport, whether it is the location sign, the direction sign, the runway exit sign, are built to strict international standards, from the height of the letters and the numbers to the width, spacing, and even the gap between the characters. Everything is standardized to ensure clarity, uniformity, and safety across airports globally. In this video, we'll break down how these designs are derived from ICAO Annex 14, Appendix 4, and why following these standards is crucial for safe and consistent airside operations. So without any delay, let's dive in and decode the design language of aerodrome signs. So to start with, signs shall be either fixed or variable message signs, which help the pilots navigate around the airfield. Depending on their nature, the color, and the information they give, they guide pilots to navigate around the airfield safely to a particular destination. Now, these signs can be mandatory instruction signs or information signs conveying specific message to the pilot of an aircraft. As per regulations, they should be frangible and they should be sufficiently low to preserve clearance for propellers and engine pods to jet aircraft. Now, the frangibility requirement we have already mentioned in our video, the link of which will be given in the description. Now, let us delve into the design of signs. When you look at signs across different airports globally, you may have noticed that the character height, the character width, the color, the dimension, the size, everything is similar across all airports globally. How are these regulated? Where are the regulations given? With this video, we'll be delving into this aspect of science and understanding how it actually works. Each character used to design sign has a specific width, height, and spacing with the adjacent character. So it becomes very important to follow a standard to bring uniformity of signs used across all the airports. As shown in the table Annex 14 Appendix 4, Table A4-1 defines each character height, width, and space. So we'll be looking at this table A4-1, letter and numeral widths and space between letters or numerals. So this table will help you decide what is the width, height, spacing between adjacent characters when you are designing any sign at an airfield. The first and foremost thing you do while designing sign is define the height of the character from the table shown. So as you can see in the table here, first you need to know what code your runway is. Is it a code 1 or 2 runway, or generally most commonly found code 3 or 4 runway? Now, if you are trying to design a mandatory instruction sign, then in case your runway is a code 3 or 4 runway, the character height will be 400 millimeters. And in case you are designing an information sign, and particularly you are designing a runway exit sign and runway vacated sign, again the height becomes 400 millimeter. But in case you are designing information signs other than the runway exit sign and the runway vacated sign, in that case the height of the character is 300 meter. What this means is, let's say you are designing a mandatory instruction sign. How do you know it is a mandatory instruction sign? It is having a red background with white inscription. So this sign is supposed to have a character height of 400 millimeter, as you can see here. Now, in case you are designing an information sign, let's say a location sign, which is not a runway exit sign or runway vacated sign, in that case, the character height is supposed to be 300 millimeters, as you can see here. Note, where a taxiway location sign is installed in conjunction with a runway designation sign, like we see here, taxiway location sign in conjunction with a runway designation sign, the character size shall be specified for a mandatory instruction sign. Like we see here, for a code 3 or 4 runway, the character height of Foxtrot 5 shall be 400 millimeters instead of 300 millimeters. Like other information sign, like for taxiway alpha, the location sign can have a character height of 300 millimeters, but when it is installed in conjunction with the mandatory instruction sign, that is the runway designation sign, shall have a height of 400 millimeters. Now that we have looked at the height of the character, let us look at the spacing between two characters. In this case, firstly, we'll be looking into the distance between two letters. To understand, let us look at this destination sign to a particular apron on the airfield. So the first character A is separated by P by a specified distance. How do you know what distance is? We'll look at it in this slide. Firstly, we refer to this table alpha, the letter to letter code number. Now, let's say the first alphabet we have here is A. We'll find the alphabet A in this table here, and it is followed by the alphabet. You see here the following letter, it is followed by the letter P. So we find it here, right? So the code for A to P becomes 2. Now you refer to part C of the table when the code number is 2, and as we already saw, this is a information sign other than the runway vacated or runway exit sign. So the character height was 300 millimeter. You see, character height 300 millimeter, and our code number is 2. So the space between A and P becomes 57 millimeter. Let's do it again. Now the alphabet P is followed by the alphabet R. Now in the preceding letter, let us find the alphabet P. You see it here. Now the alphabet that follows P is R. Again, you find it here. The code number becomes 1 again. For code number 1 and the character height of 300 millimeters, again the space between these two becomes 71 millimeters. So the space between the alphabet P and the alphabet R is 71 millimeters. Likely you can conduct the same exercise for the alphabet R and O, O and N. Now probably the doubt in your mind must be, what is the spacing between this arrow and the alphabet A? We'll be looking at it in the next slides. So now we are here with what should the distance be between two alphabets on the sign. Firstly, you look at this table A. You find out the code number that is referring to this preceding alphabet and the following alphabet. Now taking that particular code number, you place it with respect to the character height you are looking at, and then you find out the spacing between the two alphabets. Now that we have seen the distance between two alphabets, let us look at the distance between two numbers, numeral to numeral code. For this, we refer to table part B, numeral to numeral code. Firstly, we see the preceding numeral. In this case, let's say runway 16-34. So the preceding numeral becomes 1. It is followed by the numeral 6. So for us, the code is code number 1. Now, since it is a mandatory instruction sign, as we remember, the character height was 400 millimeters. So you refer to part C of the table here. For code 1 and the character height of 400 millimeters, the distance is 96 millimeters. So the distance between the numbers 1 and 6 should be 96 millimeter. Now let us look at the distance between the numbers 3 and 4. The preceding numeral being 3 and the next numeral being 4. You see here, so the code for the number 3 and 4 becomes 2. With the code number 2 and the character height of 400 millimeters, the distance is 76 millimeters. So the distance between 3 and 4 here is 76 millimeter. So this is how you find out the spacing between two numerals. Now that we have seen the spacing between numerals and the spacing between two alphabets, let us look at the width of the letters. On part D of the table, we have the width of the letter. Let's say the letter for us is A. The width of this alphabet, since it is a location sign and it has a height of 300 millimeters, the width of this alphabet should be 255 millimeter, while the alphabet Bravo should again have a width of 205 millimeter. Now when we look at the numerals here, the width of the number 1 Having a height of 400 millimeter, since it is a mandatory instruction sign, should be 98 millimeter. The number 6, having a height of 400 millimeter, should have a width of 274 millimeter. So using these part A, B, C, D and E, we have understood what is the spacing between two numbers, spacing between two alphabets, the width of the alphabet, the width of the numbers. So we have basically overall understood the design of signs. Now let us look at some of the nitty-gritties for the design of signs. The space between words or group of characters forming an abbreviation or symbol should be equal to 0.5 to 0.75 of the height of the characters. Which means, let us look at this example, mil space D followed by an arrow. So this is a group of word followed by another. So the space between mil and this D, how is it? So how is it decided? Basically it should be half to 3/4 of the height of the character. Now this is an information sign. So for a code 3 or 4 runway, the character height should be 300 millimeters. So the space between these two groups of characters should be half to 3 by 4th of the character height, which is 300 millimeters. So it should be between 150 to 225 millimeter. Followed by this, we have the concept that, except that when an arrow is located with a single character, such as let's say B followed by an arrow, so this is a direction sign, space between the B and the arrow is reduced to not less than 1/4 of the height of the character in order to provide a good visual balance. So this means the space between the arrow and B should be not less than quarter of 300 millimeters in this case for a code 3 or 4 runway, which means the space should not be less than 75 millimeter. Now, when a numeral follows a letter or vice versa, we use the code number 1. So, which means that we have already seen the spacing between two numbers and two alphabets. What is the spacing between an alphabet and a number? In this case, we use the code 1 while we refer to table C. So basically, we use code 1, and we already know for a code 3 or 4 runway, the character height is 300 millimeter. Directly come here. So spacing between foxtrot and 5 will be 71 millimeters. Now, when a hyphen, dot or diagonal stroke follows a character or vice versa, again we use the code 1. For the intersection takeoff sign, the height of lowercase m, which represents meters, is 3/4 or 0.75 of the height of the preceding 0, and spaced from the preceding 0 at code 1 for the character height of the numeral. So what basically it means is the character height of this m representing meters, it is 3/4 of the height of the preceding 0, which means for a code 3 or 4 runway, we know that this character height is 300 millimeter. The height of m, it should be 3/4 of 300 millimeters, that is 225 millimeter. The spacing between 0 and m is we found out using code 1. Again, we know that the character height is 300 millimeters, so the space should be 71 millimeters. So now we have understood the small nitty-gritties in the design of signs. Further, the black vertical delineator between adjacent direction sign should have a width of approximately 0.7 of the stroke width, like you see here. The black delineator should have 0.7 of the stroke width. The yellow border on a stand-alone location sign should be approximately 0.5 stroke width. Like you can see here, this yellow border of the location signboard, it should be 0.5 stroke width. Now further, in order to understand the total face width, we see if this is the total height of the character that you see here, the space between the border is half the height, and below also you give a space of half the height. The total height of the signboard becomes twice the height of the character. Again here, like let's say the height of this particular sign, let's say the height of the character 8 is 400 millimeter in case of a code 3 or 4 runway. In that case, the space on top is 200 millimeter and below is 200 millimeter. So the total height becomes 800 millimeter, as you can see here. Legend height 400 millimeter, the face height is 800 millimeter. Similarly, the space you give towards the left and right near the border is again half the height, that is 200 millimeter in this case. Further, arrow dimensions shall be, in this case, since we are talking about an information sign, in this case, since the legend height is 300 millimeters, the stroke width will be 48 millimeters. Hope you all enjoyed this short video on design of airfield signs. With this, we come to the end of the video on airfield signs, where we have understood mandatory instruction signs, information signs, and we have understood the design specifications of these signs. I hope you enjoyed this video by Aviation Avi. This presentation was prepared by Mr. Shantanu, and I'm Anvesha presenting it to you. Aviation Avi, go we feel the most alive. Thank you.